Picture a shop in a town that's close to Kenya's administration. What if that shop was set on fire because of violence? How long would it take the government to respond, especially if that shop was lying right next to that town's main thoroughfare? Now think of 2 shops. Picture 5 even, 10, 15. Think of 20 shops on fire. Now think of 1/3 of that town's business district alight. How long do you think that the government would take to respond to such a crisis? The army was called into Ramu to quell the violence. But all it and the police did was to ensure that a lull in that violence would ensue.
We have 2 major causes. One is political. Second, we have clanism. There's a lot of hatred between the clans that reside in the county. And particularly between the Degodia and the Gare.
The hatred still bleeds out in images comparable to those that Kenyans saw in the aftermath of a disputed presidential election in 2008. The town is a shadow of its former self.
Mtatoka hapa. Sisi hata kama kijana mmoja anapaki, sisi kutoka. Mtatoka. Hata hata kama mmoja anapaki tunapigana na hawa.
Waxay joogan Mandera. Meesha la dhaha suuq xoolaha.
And whether one is from the Gare or Degodia clan, the vapors of more violence hang heavy in Ramu town.
Pesa yake milioni 4 shilingi 500.
65-year-old Golo Mohammed's eyes sift through what used to be a line of 5 shops that he built over decades.
And here we used to have cyber for computer studies here.
And standing on the slab of what was to be his inheritance, Golo's son, Hussein, remembers the day that his father's business came crashing down. Golo and his son Hussein both point out something that we hear about more and more in our visit to the region.
But that day I was here, when you can see the fire was being lit and how it started. I even saw it with my eyes, with my naked eyes. Someone carrying a gun, shooting others, doing all those things, running at one side. I have witnessed that.
Be they Gare like Golo and Hussein, or Degodia like 46-year-old Hassan Farah, everyone here admits that there are 2 groups that are far more dangerous than the average civilian. Is it a fact that there are 2 militias in this county, one Gare and one Degodia?
Yes, it is a fact. And we are not hiding it. We are not denying anything.
From what you've been told, how well armed are these militias?
They are well armed. They have sophisticated weapons.
They are militias of both groups. We talk of the Republic of Kenya, where we do have militias. The last time when we came for a peace mission and we were in Banisa, the DC himself told me, look, there's a group here who is more armed than us, and we can't go to.
I've heard of allegations of there being a Degodia militia. Is there one from the Gare community? Have you heard?
From Gare community? The way I can see.
Conversations become strained if you ask which militia group did what. Everybody gives an answer that favors the cause of their clan.
Uchana wanachina hapa wanafanya biashara kwa usiku wanafuka. Kwa hivyo hawa sasa ni hawa tumekao ndio naishi.
Proof of their existence has been confined to eyewitness reports and a bitter harvest of destroyed villages and a piling body count on both sides.
There are crude weapons like panga, stones and others are being used. Also there are some gunshot wounds which are also there.
At the Ramu Sub-District Hospital, Medical Superintendent Mohammed Mukhtar Suka tells us of a curious occurrence days after the violence started.
On the first evening also, a body of a young man who was thought to be a militia was brought to the hospital by a police van, of which both communities denied to claim that, both denied that he or she is not belonging to them. Gare community denied, Degodia denied.
The communities may be reluctant to expose their own groups, but the groups haven't been shy in exposing themselves. This video has been widely distributed to members of the Gare community. The fighters in it are part of a militia group that defends them. And in this video, which we received from confidential sources, reveals that the Degodia too have a very well-armed militia waiting in the wings. In both videos, you see many similarities. The most common weapon being AK-47 assault weapons or G3 assault rifles. The two groups, we are told by police officers on the ground, also have rocket-propelled grenade launchers and anti-tank machine guns. While not represented on the videos, both groups number in the hundreds and have strong ties to Kenya's neighbor to the north, Ethiopia. The two militia groups formed as a result of inter-clan conflicts between the same two sub-clans of the Somali community in Ethiopia. But as the conflicts there deepened, they came across the border, and since the year 2011, these groups have played a major role in every tribal confrontation there. The group's numbers are strongest in the areas where their communities are in the majority. The Degodia militia group has high numbers on the Ethiopian side of the Kenya-Ethiopia border near the villages of Malkamari and Ramu. While the Gare militia group is strongest across the borders of Mandera town, Elwak and Moyale in Marsabit county. Ramu, for instance, proved to be a town that the police had misread tactically as far as planning went.
When the conflicts started, we had very few officers stationed at Ramu. And when we never expected that there were militias actually inside Ramu town. The militias that we were anticipating to get were from the Ethiopian side and also from Elwak side. Little did we know that people inside the town had sophisticated weapons.
That, though, is information that no one community is willing to give objectively. All each group wants is for the parts of the town where they incurred the heaviest damage to be shown at the expense of the other community. Suspicion of each other and even of our own presence is palpable. As we filmed the damage on our first evening in Ramu town, we got mobbed by what seemed to be at first curious onlookers. We found ourselves having to explain to a crowd of increasingly agitated men, all from one community, that our presence there was not to misrepresent what happened.
What are you saying? What are you saying exactly? That someone has informed you of what exactly?
Who has updated you that there's houses burned in this area? Shot.
Now let me explain. Sisi tuliona wacha tubaki, tuangalie side zote, tusiangalie tu side ya Degodia, tuangalie ya Gare, tuangalie ya Murule, kila mtu ambaye aliathirika tuangalie ili tujue. Hakuna Mkenya anajua hii taarifa, hii kitu ilifanyika.
We would have to stop rolling for the day. Dusk had fallen, and members of both communities advised us to stay indoors. We'd have to wait for sunrise to see for ourselves the full extent of the destruction here. For a conflict that went unreported for 3 months, what we saw was incredible. The blackened walls from houses set on fire. Houses stand stripped naked, almost as if they're ashamed to still be standing. Innocence was lost in these homes.
Petrol bombs and grenades, we're told, set the tone for the violence here. And bullet-riddled walls sent the message home that this was a fight to the death for many on both sides of the divide. On walls where family portraits had probably been hung, you see war graffiti. In houses attacked by the Gare, filthy language describes the Degodia. On the walls of a destroyed Gare home, the same derogatory language is appended. It's obvious. The mistrust and a deep hatred was the seed planted in the hearts of those who perpetrated these attacks. And it's spreading to civilians that once lived in peace, side by side. The ruckus of a football game underway is a welcome break from the tension weighing down Ramu town. We find these young boys going at it. Then we're reminded that this was supposed to be the first day back at school for many of them. And their choice of a field jolts us back into the reality of where we are. This is Ramu's main market. Only you can't call it that anymore, because a market has people in it.
But since the conflict began, the shelves have been empty, and that's been 3 months now. If you're Degodia now, or if you're Gare, you'd have to go to a market where your tribesmen buy and sell. And that says something about this conflict, because even in the conflicts that took place before this one, this market never closed, not once. It feels as if an invisible line has been crossed. But whether both tribes will be able to pull back from it this time around is really anybody's guess.
"46-year-old Bishara Dakat used to run a restaurant that depended on the milk traded at this market. Now she makes her tea from milk purchased in the Degodia market. It's still just as good, but the memories that haunt her from when she lost her old shop leave a bitter aftertaste. The partitions of her makeshift restaurant today are burnt corrugated iron sheets, which were the roof of her old shop. 3 months after the violence, she's just getting back onto her feet.
guriga meesha sadiiq qaxooti ay ku yihiin hantideedii waxay dukaamadii wixii dhan dukaan aan kula hayay meel shaantoleeyada la dhaha kulli way isku xulceen macal barafiyay kulli way xulceen hadda waxaan ka hay malaha meeshaan hadda iska fadhiya dhibaatada waxay gaareen intaasoo lacag waa iga gubatay intaasoo waxa way iga gubatay ilmaha yacni certificate-kooda ilmaha iskuulka ay ku akhrisanayeen kulli way iga gubteen waxaan kala soo baxay malaha gambiskayga iyo dharkayga ma ogeey ilmaha kala soo baxeen igoo saan yaa intuu qulmo qaraabo una ay waday.
She's one of the hundreds of business people whose lives were trapped in the fog of a tribal war. A fog which lifted, leaving Ismail Mohammed Noor in the same place as Bishara. He used to sit in the chair that he now lifts out of the rubble, making clothes for people from both communities.
Ethiopians gidigaas nagu soo weerareen si toos ah noo soo weeraray illa magaalada hoose ka soo bilaaween shaantulee ka soo bilaaween.
Ismail is Gare, but his loss and hers are the same, but they share more in common than just loss. The conflict between the Gare and the Dagodia may be a fierce one, but from the perspective of tribe, it really is a fight between two brothers. The Somali people all have a shared ancestry and are spread throughout the Horn of Africa. Somalia, Kenya, Ethiopia and Djibouti are countries to which the Somali are native. The clans of the Somali are diverse, but they all trace a common ancestry back to 5 main clans. The Darod, the Dir, the Isak, the Digil and Mirfile, and the Hawiye. The Gare and the Degodia are actually subclans under the Hawiye clan, along with well over 10 other subclans. They are much closer in their ethnicity than these divisions could ever suggest. But political contests have a way of driving a deadly wedge between even the closest of relatives. A reading of the history of violence in Mandera and the north would suggest that another cause for the violence is resources, the fight over pasture. That is not the case in Mandera at this time. River Dawa, the semi-permanent water body that snakes through parts of the county, is full. There may be dry riverbeds in parts of the county, but they are rimmed by a lush, deep green foliage that transports one to images of a vast Eden. Herds are healthy, and there is enough for everyone's needs. Even if, in a not too distant future, the sun and the earth will claim this fertility. Yet in the villages we travel to, the green overgrowth does little to hide the evidence of a conflict that burned through parts of the county that the government didn't reach.
If you've never heard of the village Malkaroka and you're a Kenyan, then you're probably amongst a majority of Kenyans who haven't. This is a small village of about 400 people on the Kenyan-Ethiopian border, subsisting mostly on food aid during famine and the dry season, like many other villages across this county. Yet, during the pre- and post-election violence that rocked parts of this county, this was an epicenter. But rather than wait for the government to come and help them rebuild their lives after their homes were torched, the people who are evicted from here have never returned. Because to them, waiting for the government to come and help them rebuild their lives is about as futile or useless as having a house with a doorway, one wall, and no roof.
The further away from Mandera one goes, the slower the government response is to incidents that take place here. All those under siege can do is run. Malkamari on the Kenyan-Ethiopian border is a town that knows this well.
Now the villagers here have had to contend with bullets flying over their heads every day. We spent the night here, and since coming here we've heard at least 3 short bursts of gunfire coming from that direction. That is the front line, where 2 militia groups have clashed and clash very often.
Walking down the main street of this town, you can see just how many of the villagers that lived here couldn't take it anymore. Padlock after padlock, door after door. The constant threat that either one of the militia groups could march into town was perhaps too much to take. Here too, the graves of those who were killed are watched over by the bereaved. But in this conflict, the dignity of a burial isn't always guaranteed. There are security forces here, and one officer speaks to me on condition of anonymity.
When you got weapons in the wrong hands, they are capable of doing anything at the discretion of the one who holds them. I would just say they are dangerous weapons.
But what he doesn't dare say, even with his back to the camera, is that security officers here know exactly where the militia groups are, but would not dare confront them. In ammunition and in some respects, in training, the militia groups from both sides match Kenya's security forces.
The government, 2 or 3 years ago, tried actually to help the Somalian government. And some young men were recruited from Kenya, taken to Somalia, and they were trained. Some were trained, but they never went to Ethiopia. So they did Somalia, but they remained here. So they have the training, they can handle the arms, and they have the military training. So we are also investigating them.
Michael Tialal, the county commissioner for Mandera County, is a man who has seen past and present conflicts develop in Mandera, his first posting to the region being in 2007. The conflict, he says, came out of the belief by both communities of their right to belong exclusively to the region, to the other community's exclusion. When the Independent Boundaries Commission sought the views of people in the county on the delineation of new administrative boundaries, the outcome actually reinforced this view, especially in what used to be known as Mandera's Central constituency.
The Gare regard the Dagodia as immigrants, that they came just the other day from Somalia, then Ethiopia, and some of them they also came from Wajir. The Dagodia fought for the creation of that constituency. Yeah, so when it was created, they thought the constituency was created for them, and they never wanted the Gare to come, or any other community to fire for that seat.
The current political leadership of Mandera is composed solely of leaders from the Gare community, from the governor to senator to members of parliament. Some Dagodia elders claim that their supporters were forced to flee when the violence began, something that Tialal disputes.
Both clans actually displaced one another. Yeah, even before the elections, I tried a lot. I went out of my way. We brought them together. And we told them to sit, the two communities. We told them to come on a negotiation table. Let them discuss and share the seats and negotiate a democracy. But they refused.
Now the seeds of a bitter rivalry have germinated. Conflict is consuming the hopes and aspirations of hundreds of thousands of people, and both militia groups are becoming difficult to control. Criminals who are striking hard and often, with a lucky few who escaped their crosshairs too traumatized to talk. On Saturday, the 11th of May, political leaders from both the Dagodia and Gare communities met with Deputy President William Ruto over the clashes. The military will soon be deployed to fight the militia groups in Mandera County, with hints of a forced disarmament of the many armed civilians in the county to follow.
We have agreed that peace is paramount, that we must have peace in that county.
Within the existence of a country with a government, we cannot have militias ruling a county from both sides. And we like them to take this initiative and willfully disarm and go back to wherever they've come from in order for us to start building the nation.
What has been missing from this conflict, though, are the reminders of what these two communities share, a faith that abhors the violence that was witnessed here, a proud ancestry and heritage that ought to overcome all divisions, and somewhere in them, a hope for peace that can be nursed even in the most dire of circumstances. This was a war that Kenya didn't see, taking place on the same soil that Kenyans from other parts of the country walk on. Yet the same hope that is nursed for peace in Mandera must be a shared one. Because no matter what part of the country each of those who suffer come from, they are all Kenyans living under the same sky.